The worst thing about the paid sex positives, or PSPs, is that they act as the acceptable face of the sex industry. I mean, any normal person is going to get turned off by listening to Peter Stringfellow or one of his Botoxed female collaborators. But the PSP can present the debate around sex providers as being about freedom, autonomy, and yes, even human rights. That's a big theme in New Zealand, that decriminalization, or decrim, has been good for the human rights of sex providers. But did you notice a clever sleight of hand there? It seems like the human rights of sex providers only apply to them as sex providers. Instead of being seen as fully rounded people, sex providers are instead defined only by how they sell themselves in the marketplace. In reality, the existence of a sex industry has already reduced the human rights of all people in New Zealand. For example, anyone, sex provider or not, who wants a right to sit in the park without punters prowling the nearby streets has lost that right. If they want their daughter to develop into a happy and confident woman, they may have lost that right too, given that young girls are being constantly bombarded by messages which tell them that selling themselves as sex objects is a cool lifestyle. I could give 100 other examples, but the PSPs have excluded all that from their equations. They want any woman who is a sex provider to define herself exclusively by what she does to pay the bills in this shitty society. For her, progress is limited to less violent johns, better health outcomes at work, the opportunity to expand into larger or more comfortable premises, etc. It's limited to her experience as an isolated individual, fighting to make her way in the market economy, as if that was the be-all and end-all of life. In short, whereas the Swedish model aspires to improve things for everyone in society by creating a world in which no one needs to sell themselves as a sex object, New Zealand is simply claiming that it will improve the experience of being sold for sex, and treating that as a completely isolated phenomenon. Now, it's true that some sex providers approve of that approach, but that's not too surprising. Seen from an individualistic angle, and if she's assuming that being a sex provider is her inevitable role, at least for the foreseeable future, then obviously she'll appreciate anything which claims to make her predicament less unpleasant. Whether or not it actually does that is another question. So yeah, if we allow the PSPs to restrict the discussion to that individualistic framework, they can point to decrim and say, that's what some sex providers want, except they normally miss out the word some. They'll even be able to find sex providers who'll form collectives to fight for decrim. However, if you broaden out the context and ask sex providers what they want, the vast majority consistently say they want out of the rotten industry which they've been forced to rely on as a way to pay the bills. And it's with that reality, rather than the distortions of a market-driven dystopia, that we should start our discussion about human rights for sex providers.